reason why you didn't see the normal theme that we have for the the Best of the Bravest, I should say, nationwide edition, is because our guest is unfortunately not here at the moment. So, and just in case this turns into another Mike Colón Power Hour, I just wanted to play that theme. That way we can go right into it. We know the deal by now. Sometimes these things happen where you coordinate, and I'm not blaming anyone. That's the wrong thing to do, and I definitely don't want my remarks to come across that way here. But sometimes you coordinate, you send out what you send out, and you get ready to do the show, and sometimes things don't manifest the way you envision them manifesting. I did contact tonight's scheduled guest, have not heard back at this time, which is a little bit concerning, and hope all's well with that guest. But in the meantime, we'll do another Mike Colón Power Hour. I'll have my phone on standby here just in case our guest does contact us, and hopefully they can sign on and we can enjoy a good conversation tonight. I got my glance. You may see me glancing. I'm sorry, I can't speak. It's been a bit of a long day. You see me glancing off to the side here. I got Knicks Pacers on the tablet. Game hasn't started yet, but it's game 2 of the Eastern Conference semifinals tonight for that particular series, in which the Knicks lead it 1-0. They won game 1 a couple nights ago, 121-117 over the Pacers. And it was a crazy game back and forth. They almost didn't win it. They were down 9 to start the fourth quarter. So they were able to come in and really clutch it up in the fourth, bear down when they needed to, got the stops they needed to, and came away with the victory in that game. And of course, last night there was Rangers Carolina game 2 of that series, and that series has been a heck of a series thus far. And the thing is, the Rangers haven't played particularly well, I don't think, and the Knicks didn't play that well either in game 1. We'll see if they give a better effort in game 2. But the beauty of it is, despite the fact that both teams really did not give you A+ performances, at least by their standards, they were able to come away with the victory. I'll delve into it a little deeper, but just to make sure we're on the safe side tonight, even if we don't have our guests come through, I'm just going to run through the ads real quick, and we'll come back and keep talking, spitballing. So the first one, as you know by now, is MC Media Editing Services. Need advice on how to start your podcast? Frustrated with the editing process? Can't find a voiceover guy? Hi, I'm Mike Colón, and I'm here to help. I'm the owner and founder of MC Media Editing Services, your premier consulting company for all things media, where I can offer you consulting advice on how to get started, and once you get started, editing, as well as voiceover work, all for a very reasonable price. If you want to reach me, you can contact me at 917-781-6189 or the email that you see listed here. I'm always available, and I'm always willing to help. Again, 917-781-6189. Why go to some giant consulting firm that's going to charge you an arm and a leg when you can just come to me? If you want to be stress-free, the way to go is to call MC. MC Media Editing Services, your premier consulting company. And should you be interested in advertising on this show, that contact information you saw there, reach out to me. And I'm very reasonable when it comes to my prices for advertising. So whatever your business may be, whatever kind of company it is that you run, should you want to promote that company here, by all means, reach on out. And speaking of companies, there's the Ryan Investigative Group for those of you that may find yourself needing a private investigator. The Mike the New Haven podcast is proudly sponsored and supported by the Ryan Investigative Group. If you need an elite PI, look no further than the elite Ryan Investigative Group, which is run by retired NYPD detective Bill Ryan, a 20-year veteran of the department who served the majority of his career in the Detective Bureau, most notably in the Arson and Explosion Squad. So if you need a PI to handle anything from fraud, legal services, and anything else that you might require, contact Bill at 347-417-1610. Again, 347-417-1610. Reach him at his website or the email that you see here. Again, if you need a PI, look no further than Bill Ryan and the Ryan Investigative Group, a proud supporter and sponsor of the Mike to New Haven podcast. And let's shout out who we have in the chat tuning in tonight. Those of you watching on YouTube, our bad. So nice when you say it twice. Is in the chat tonight. He says, still waiting to hear that Mike Colón has entered Proby School. Soon, my friend, soon. We have a couple steps to go first before I get to that. I'm going to work on one of them this summer, and that is get my EMT, and hopefully I can pass that class. Not fail it. That would be nice if I don't fail the class, and gradually begin the ascent towards getting to where I want to be, and that is, well, Garrett Lindgren, of course, an alumni of Rescue 3, Squad 41, back during its enhanced engine days. Christian Williams is here. Darren Phillips, if I mentioned you once, I'll mention you again. Same thing with you, Dawn Marie. Glad to see all of you in the chat tonight. Yeah, like I was saying, I mean, as Darren says, let's talk hockey. Rangers didn't play a particularly clean game 1. Didn't look too good. I thought, especially in the last period, they didn't have the puck a lot. They were pinned down their own zone way too much for my liking. And you can't, at this time of year, you really can't afford that. If you spend enough time on the defensive, I don't care how good your goaltending is, eventually a puck is going to sneak through. And I was fully expecting that towards the end in game one because they couldn't clear it. Carolina's very good at playing keep away. And when you have enough time to set up shots and set up plays, you keep putting pucks on net. Like I said, one will go through. But it didn't happen. And the Rangers took a really dumb penalty, too, on top of that, with like 40 seconds to go. Vincent Trocheck, who was the hero of game two, I'll get to him momentarily, threw the puck into the stands in front of the referee. And I'm just screaming at my television, what are you doing? You're already down at this point, or not down in the game, but in terms of personnel, because they have an extra forward on the ice because of the fact that they put their goalie on the bench. So you have an empty net. You're already shorthanded as it is, even without the penalty. And now you're extra shorthanded because, hey, you just committed that penalty, which was, I believe, a delay of game. And thankfully, Carolina didn't cash in. I was just waiting for that shoe to drop, but the boys bared it down, and I don't think they cleared the puck until there was a good 5 seconds left. So they escaped. I thought they escaped with the game one victory. You can't be taking 5 penalties in one game either, where, unfortunately, they put themselves in a really disadvantageous spot, but they had a great penalty kill. And Carolina just chose a good day to suck on the power play, and they went 0-5. Now, game two was interesting in that, again, I don't think the Rangers played particularly well in that game either. I had a work obligation, so I got home from that. By the time I got home and flipped the game on, it was a second period. They were trailing. Lafreniere scores the goal, one of the 2 goals he scored. They tie it. Carolina scores, who else but Jake Gensel, who's been a Ranger killer his entire career, of course, going back to his time with Pittsburgh. He always scores big goals against the Rangers. And the Rangers got the power play goal off Kreider's goal in front of the net in the early goings of the third period. But in overtime, if you look at it, the Rangers didn't necessarily, and listen, I'll take it, but I didn't think the Rangers played well enough and put themselves in a good enough position to win. They get a power play with 1 minute to go, 2 minutes to go or so in the game. Looked terrible on that power play. Couldn't get set, couldn't win a faceoff in their zone, and essentially Carolina, it almost felt was on the power play because they had 2 great chances to win it late, but Igor was a stone wall last night. Going to the overtime, Carolina gets 2 power plays. Trouba played an awful game by his standards. I mean, Trouba was terrible yesterday. And the Rangers get a power play, and, it's who else but Vinny Trocheck. And the key was just to put the puck on the net. Don't overthink it. Put the puck on the net. Hope you hit a defenseman's skate. Hope you hit a stick, and it finds its way into the net. We've seen plenty of goals like that. This one was scored off a rebound. And Vinny, fittingly, who played the most minutes out of anybody on either team, 35 minutes in total on the ice last night, was there for the rebound. There was a delayed reaction because when he scored that goal, I thought Freddie had Anderson, that is, the Carolina Hurricanes goaltender, who used to be on the Maple Leafs as well. He's always been a very solid goaltender. Just injuries have bugged him over the years. But when he plays, he's very good. I thought he had stonewalled it between his pads. So I was waiting for the ref to blow the whistle and signal dead puck. Then I see Vinny lift his arms up in celebration. And, naturally the goal horn goes off and the Rangers are going down to Carolina with a 2-0 lead. Am I ready to think big things about this team yet? No, I think you have to play it as it lies. This is a team that has not been to a Stanley Cup final in 10 years. This is a team that has not won a Stanley Cup since, 1994. So it's one of those things where, listen, between the Knicks, Giants, Rangers, and Yankees, I've endured my fair share of tough losses over the years in the playoffs. And there's a lot of teams I thought would go and get the job done that unfortunately may have gotten pretty far in the postseason, but when it came to finishing the job and going all the way, fell short. So for those reasons, I like to pump the brakes. It's not that I'm being negative. It's just that I'm being cautious. I'll believe it once I see it. Hopefully, would I love to see it? Sure, I would. But there's a long way to go. I mean, you don't, Darren Phillips, I'm sorry, buddy. 1994. Well, the Canucks had a heck of a run that year. Just couldn't finish the job in that particular Cup final. And that's one of the best Cup finals in the history of the sport, at least in the top 5 in terms of finals. You can't find many series better than that. And that was the last Stanley Cup final really before the Devils came in and ruined everything, which is much respect to them. Great team, back in those days. But that was right before the dead puck era came into play, where the Devils decided we're going to grind everything to a screeching halt and you're just going to have to deal with that. which when you have Scott Stevens, Ken Danico, and Scott Niedermeyer on your team, and Martin Brodeur and net, you can do that. And so the rest of the league thought they could do that, and that led to a particularly boring style of hockey for a little bit. That series happened right before all that. So it's kind of the hallmark or cap on the end of a certain era. But back to the present day, listen, it's the same thing with the Knicks. Do I want to see the Knicks, who have not been to an NBA final since 1999, have not been to an Eastern Conference final since 2000, have not won the NBA championship since 1973? Would I love to see them get to the finals? Of course, naturally, as a fan, you're rooting for the best. But I like to just pump the brakes, because all it takes is just one loss and one little momentum swing, and things are going downstream really quick. So it's one of those things where I'm cautiously optimistic. I want them to keep playing, both teams, as they've played where they've won. They need to shore up in certain areas, but I don't think the series is in terms of Rangers Carolina, is over by any means. They're up 2-0, which is how you want to start. You protected home ice. That's the key. And you're using that to your advantage. You can very well go down to Carolina and lose 2 straight. This is a good hockey team, and they're very well coached. And I've always had nothing but love and respect for Rod Brind'Amour. Even as a Ranger fan, he was one of my favorite players growing up. And the first Stanley Cup final I can remember watching and paying attention to was that 2006 final against the Edmonton Oilers, where that's another underrated, really great series. It's the first one out of the lockout, and it went 7 games, and Carolina took it in 7 games. And Rod was a big part of that. He got to finally lift the Stanley Cup. Great player. Travesty he's not in the Hall of Fame. I don't know what's taking so long. He should have been in the Hall of Fame yesterday. Terrific offensive player. One of the best defensive forwards the game has ever seen. I don't know how much more you need to see from a career like that. And, he's a guy. Carolina wasn't doing much of anything until he took them over. They hadn't made the playoffs since 2009. So he came in and made them into a contender, to where not only have they made the playoffs 6 years in a row, but they've at least made the second round, if not better, in all 6 of those years, including this year. So you're going to go into a hostile environment. It's not easy playing in that arena in Carolina. We saw that a couple of years ago in 2022. The Rangers, really up until Game 7, couldn't win in that building. So it's going to be. They were 1-3. The one was the big one, Game 7, but they not only couldn't win up until Game 7 in that building, but they looked completely different. And part of that too was a different coach back then, Gerard Gallant, who is not good at X's and O's to the degree that Peter Laviolette is, who ironically was the coach of that Carolina Hurricane squad when they won the Cup in 2006. But, we'll see what happens, basically. It's never easy to win on the road. They were able to do it against Washington because Washington didn't belong in the playoffs. That was an easy peasy series. But it's not easy to do it against a team that won 52 games and has as many offensive threats as the Hurricanes do. So we'll see how that shapes out. Ideally, you go down there. I don't expect them to win both games. I'd be shocked if they did, pleasantly, but very much shocked if they did. Your best bet is to try to split those 2 games down there. You're not going to win both in all likelihood. You can either take Game 3 or take Game 4 and try to come back up to the Garden for Game 5, up 3-1 with a chance to close it out, go to the conference finals. But there's steps to that. Don't take 5 penalties in a game. That'd be nice. Be disciplined. Don't get pinned down in your own zone where you don't have the puck for what feels like an eternity. And if you shore up in those areas, you'll find a way to win, and that's kind of what both teams have been doing. They haven't played the best, but they found a way. Much like the Knicks did in Game 1, started playing good defense late. They were getting torched defensively. They cleaned it up, started hitting clutch shots down the stretch, benefited from a few referee calls, which they normally don't get. And here they are, up 1-0, and in a series that dredges up a lot of memories from the 90s. If you're a basketball fan of a certain age, you definitely remember Knicks Pacers, Reggie Miller and Spike Lee and Patrick Ewing. But that's where things stand right now. It's been a particularly exciting spring in New York City. It's nice to see this. The city, which otherwise is not in good shape these days for reasons we don't have to get into, but you well know why. Is at least has this as a positive. It is at least enjoying this point. Hopefully it doesn't end anytime soon. This has been a very much enjoyable run thus far. So, we'll see where it takes us. This is essentially the Colón Report Part 2. I don't know where our guest is. I hope he's all right. Haven't heard anything. Attempted to reach out previously, just for those of you just tuning in to tonight's guest. This was supposed to originally be the Best of the Bravest Nationwide Edition Volume 2, and I don't know. So we don't really know what stands with that. Your guess is as good as mine. If he shows up, we'll do it. But if not, we'll just keep talking for a little bit until the Knick game comes on, and then I'll leave you. I have it on the side here, waiting for the game to start. It's the pregame right now. And hopefully I'll be going to bed a happy man like I did yesterday after the Ranger victory, if the Knicks can do their job tonight. Moving on from sports, what else is going on this week? Well, a lot, as we see in New York City. And just briefly, I'm not going to go into the details, but I think the NYPD is in a situation where sometimes no press is good press. And if you look up what's going on, again, I'm not going to dive into it, but if you look up what's going on, no press is good press in that if you're in the press too much, particularly if your upper echelon is in the press too much, and not for the reasons that would benefit a police department with as rich history as the New York City Police Department, maybe it's time to fall back a little bit. And it would be good, and I think it would behoove certain members of the police department of the city of New York to follow that advice and perhaps lay low for a bit and hit the reset button collectively on a department that would really benefit from hitting the reset button. And that's all I have to say on that. And if you know me and you know what's been going on lately, you know what I'm talking about. So besides that, I guess we can briefly on Getting Salty. Getting Salty, we've been, on fire lately. So Gons is away. I've been pulling double duty between this show and Getting Salty because with Gons being away on a vacation, and well-deserved, he works very hard. For those of you that don't know, his day job is he's a chief. I believe he's a battalion chief, if I'm not mistaken, down in Florida for one of the fire departments down there. I forget which area. I'm not sure if it's Fort Lauderdale. Don't hold me to it. But he's got a big day job where he's in charge of the training down there and the safety aspect of things. And the department is no small department. It's a pretty big department. It's a pretty big city down there in Florida. So he's doing that during the day, and then he'll come and produce Getting Salty. So whenever he can get away and have some R&R, listen, by all means, take it. He deserves it. He's a very hardworking guy, good family man. Got nothing but love and respect for Gons. So I stepped in, and we've been rocking and rolling. I mean, I thought our tribute show to Chief Gansey was wonderful. And Chief Gansey, I knew about it because as I can expand on it now, as I mentioned, and I didn't want to talk too much about it because naturally we had two great guests there, and Chief Gansey's son, Chris Gansey, who himself is a chief now on the job, and Chief Jonas, who that guy goes without saying how much of a legend he is in the FDNY. Yes, Monday's show was very enjoyable as well. I'll get to Monday's show in a moment, Darren. But really, I first read the book that Chris wrote, Chief Gansey's son, the other Chief Gansey, that is. I feel bad calling him Chris. I feel like I'm being disrespectful. So let me just say Chief Chris Gansey. That's better. They put his title first. He wrote that book, and I plucked it off the shelf in my second grade class in 2007, Mr. Dusso's class. And the picture that was used in our thumbnail of Chief Gansey in the rain, that was the picture that I saw on the front cover of the book. And, Mr. Nuzzo put that on the shelf for, I don't know when she got the book exactly, but it was there in that class. And I gladly picked it up and I read it from cover to cover. And that was kind of my introduction to Chief Peter Gansey. And the best way you can summarize a guy like that is a product of a bygone era, A, and B, a warrior until the end. Lou mentioned it in the promo. He was a warrior until the end. And on that terrible morning back in 2001, September 11th, 2001, Chief Gansey, moments before, I believe, Commissioner Von Essen, who, as you guys know, I'm a big fan of. I love Commissioner Von Essen. I'm hoping I keep prodding him to try to come on the show. I mean, he's kind of on the fence and hesitant, but I'm like, dude, I'm not going to give you a hard time. You guys in the audience, even in the thing that I really try to drill home before I continue with Chief Gansey to those that may be hesitant, and particularly to Commissioner Von Essen, is that what's good about you guys in the audience is that even if you may not agree with certain things a guest has said or done in the past. Let's say they were a previous police commissioner or previous fire commissioner. You're so respectful of the show that you don't go crazy and say controversial or inappropriate things in the chat. You may raise questions, which I totally understand, but you don't go in there and you don't create a scene and cause havoc that would bring the show down, because you understand what the show is. And you guys have always been, you've gone about it with nothing short of aplomb. And that's what makes this show flow so easily, that I know I never have to worry about my audience being disrespectful. It's about as respectful an audience as you can find. So I keep telling them that. I'm like, no one's going to give you a hard time. If you have somebody in there that in the event that they do cause a ruckus in the chat, I have moderators. They'll just toss the person out and let's talk. You had a great career. You did a lot of good as fire commissioner. I would love to chronicle your career. And I had him on the show well before I knew what StreamYard was, well before I even started my YouTube channel. I was 18 back then. And if you go to the Wayback Machine on Spreaker and Apple and go back to my earliest episodes when I sounded like I was recording with a potato can because I would sit on the edge of the bed. I didn't know what I was doing. I would sit there and record the conversations which were being held on speakerphone off of my tablet. And he came on and we talked about his response to 9/11 and the aftermath. But I think, unfortunately, when people talk to Commissioner Von Essen, they only talk about that day, which is important to recognize. But every year around the anniversary, he goes on TV, he'll do an interview or two. And as I told him, I said, Lieutenant, in Cross's case, people know your story from the World Trade Center on 9/11. Obviously, it's a legendary story of survival. But you did so much outside of that. You had a great career outside of that nobody ever asked you about, which is why it was so good to get Lieutenant Cross on the show, as I did a while ago. So it's the same thing with Commissioner Von Essen. You worked in the Bronx during the height of the war years. Let's talk about that. You were in the Union for a while. Let's talk about that too. And then we could talk about some of the stuff you did as commissioner, like starting up the squads. And look how great a thing. Was he the only one that started it? No, it was a collaborative effort, but he was one of the key guys in why the squads exist. And look how great that's become. There's 8 of them now, 7 back then. It's him, Chief Downey, Chief Fian, as he liked to be called. Hence why I don't call him Commissioner Fian. Out of respect, he, according to those who knew him best, he always preferred the title of chief. So that's what we'll give the late, great Chief Fian. They started up the squad. So I'm like, why wouldn't you want to come on and talk about that? But we'll get him. I'm not going to give up. Every now and then I circle with him. I don't hear anything, but I'm not going to give up, because that's a career I really want to archive for this. Really just an outstanding job he did, I felt, as an FDNY commissioner. Some guys don't care for him. I understand. But, I don't think anybody's going to go after him in 2024. But as we were saying, back to the Chief Gansey show, and Lou summed it up perfectly. We knew of Chief Gansey, but now we feel like we really knew him, because we knew of him as the chief of department who unfortunately was killed in the line of duty on 9/11, the only chief of department ever to die in the line of duty in the department's history. And let's hope it stays that way. We would never want to see anything like that again. But his life, his rise through the ranks, all that he accomplished, not just in the fire department front, but as a family man, getting Chief Jonas and Chief Chris Gansey on the program to dissect that and go through that in such great detail was so beautiful, because I'm like, wow, what a great guy. And, it may sound cliche after a police officer or a firefighter is killed in line of duty that everyone says what a great guy they were. But the reality is, it's always the best, unfortunately, that lose their lives in the line of duty. You know why? Because they're putting themselves out there. The slouches on the job never put themselves out there. The slouches on the job, either job, are always looking out for number one, unfortunately. And that's why they're never in those situations where they're risking their lives, because they don't care enough about people and they don't care enough about the job to do that. Chief Gansey was the guy that did that. And one of the things I think he did that was impressive, and I got to ask Mike Kane about this a while ago, and Lou Garcia, when I had the fire marshals on for the Best of the Bravest, was he really turned the fire marshal's office around. That office was not running like a well-oiled machine. There was a lot of problems there. And it was rare for a uniform chief, and I don't think it ever happened, if I remember correctly, that a uniform chief was put in charge of that. But he was, and he had it from 1994 to 1997. And from where the fire marshal's office was in 1994 to where it was in 1997 when Chief Gansey moved on to become chief of operations, night and day, night and day. And I think the changes he made to that office are still being felt in a positive sense to this day because of how he brought it into the 20th century and put procedures and parameters in place to make sure it stayed running well into the 21st century. And boy, has it. He did a great job with that office, and he was chief of department for about 3 years, if you count his time as acting chief of department. He officially had the title bestowed upon him in 1999 and held it. And a guy like that, he probably would have been chief of department for a dozen years. The age to leave the FDNY is 65, I believe. Chief Gansey was 54 when he died. So who's to say he wouldn't have held that title for another 10 years and done more great things with the FDNY. He was someone that really cared about the fire service and cared about people. So to be able to hear about his life and career and hear about what he did that day, where he could have left, he could have went to a command center, but as he told Mayor Giuliani, I'm not leaving my men. He stayed right there with Chief Torrey on the scene. I'd love to get Chief Torrey on the show, not just to talk about that, but to talk about his whole career, because Chief Torrey is another one that did a lot of great work with the FDNY. And unfortunately, the North Tower collapsed, and him and Chief Ian were killed in that collapse. But what a story. What a story. And Monday's show was great, too, because we had Chief Myers on, and Mike Myers. No, not the scary Mike Myers, the good Mike Myers. Really painted a great picture of his career. And I've known Chief Myers through LinkedIn for quite some time. Him and I are connected on LinkedIn, so I'm quite familiar with his work. We're friends on Facebook, see him there. But to actually talk with him one-on-one, and I wasn't asking most of the questions Lou and Coops were, it was very enjoyable. It was very enjoyable. Really insightful guy. Pardon me. Really insightful guy. Very smart man. And somebody that you're glad is there in the FDNY. FDNY has a really great brain trust right now. And there's plenty of chiefs I could mention, but we'd be here all night. But just if you look at the top of Chief Hodgins, Chief Esposito, Chief Lieb, and Chief Myers, along with many other talented ones there, that's about as good as it gets. You have so much acumen there. And what I love about it, and you don't see this with too many jobs, is here's Chief Myers with 33 years in the job, right? He's got 33 years. And most people, when they've been in a place for 33 years, you would think they're winding it down, because, and they kind of have a right to, like when you've done something for so long, if you want to start taking it a little easier as you approach the finish line of your career, whatever that career may be, hey, 33 years of hard work, you've earned that right. Go ahead, have at it. But he's not. And he's, same thing with Chief Esposito, same thing. Yeah, I can't talk today. Chief Esposito, rather, and Chief Lieb. They're still so engaged. They have that proby energy, right? Like there's so much enthusiasm there, but there's 35 years on the job. And, more than that, if you count their experience as volunteer firefighters, as is the case with Chief Lieb, 31 years or 32 this year, it'll be for Chief Lieb in the FDNY. But if you count his time as a volunteer, it's closer to 40. Still has so much enthusiasm, which you love, because that's contagious. And when the members see that, it creates a good atmosphere and a good morale in the FDNY. And I think for reasons that we don't have to get into, that's a huge part of the reason where even if the FDNY has its issues and frustrations from time to time, as every agency does, the FDNY does not have the same morale problem that the NYPD does. It's significantly better morale in one end of the job and one end of public safety than it is in the other one. And it's unfortunate that is the case, but a huge part of it is leadership. And when you don't have that, we see how much it hurts. And John Costello says, I don't know Chief Myers, but from Monday's night's interview, I don't think his ascent has stopped. And no, it certainly hasn't. It certainly has not. It's been a heck of a run for him. Began in 1991. I didn't know he was a firefighter in Rescue 4, actually. I knew he had SOC experience. I did not know he was there. And what a great, if you could snapshot someone's career in different portions of it, that's about as good as it gets right there, to be a fireman there. And unfortunately, was there tragedy involved? Yes, 2001 was a particularly rough year for Rescue 4 because of the Father's Day fire, 9/11. But to be able to be in an elite firehouse like that, with some of the guys that were there back then, you almost wish you could freeze it in time. And what I wouldn't give to be a fly on the wall, kind of like I was telling Caitlin Langone the other day in regards to 10 truck ESU, I would love, if time machines were real, to go back to the late 90s and be a fly on the wall at Rescue 1 or 4 or any of them, really, all 5 of them. Be a fly on the wall, at an ESU truck and just hear what was being talked about back then. Because for as much as the razzing goes on between PD and FD, you got a lot of really talented and smart guys I found from doing this show on both ends. And just to listen to those guys talk and see them in the, not that they're not in the prime of their careers now, but you know what I mean? Like the early stages of their career, knowing what they would go on to accomplish, that would be so cool. That would be just amazing. And I got a glimpse into that through talking with Chief Myers, for sure. Hey, Chris Epton's in the chat. Will be on this Friday. And I believe I got to send you the link, buddy. So I'll make sure I do that before the night is out. That way you have it and you can sign on, unless I have already. But even then, I'll send it to you again because make sure we have all the bases covered. So I guess, I can kind of promo Chris now because he's in the chat. And thank you, buddy, for sending the pictures. I saw them. And I will load them into the queue accordingly. But Chris Ebden, as I pull up his outline here, was someone that spent a significant amount of time in New Jersey and New York between the 80s and 90s. And he was there in quite a bit of a sweet spot in terms of emergency response and emergency management. I will send it, Chris, in New York City. And that getting there in 89, the city was a wild, wild west. I mean, for as much as the city may not be in the best of condition now, it does not compare to how dangerous it was back then. That was the peak of the violence in New York City and everything that was going on that was making the city, no pun intended, a pity. And so he was there for that as a member of New York City EMS at a time in which I felt, in talking with Zach Goldfarb, as we have previously, and Steve Kerr, a ascent for New York City EMS. It was really those two guys, along with Bob Becker, who brought them out of the dark ages, modernized a lot that had to do with their operations, and plenty of other contributors too, but those three come to mind, and made New York City EMS, the sporty days. That's right, Chris. Made New York City EMS the premier agency in terms of medical care in New York City at that time, and perhaps in the tri-state area as a whole. Equipment changed. They got new vehicles. They started up the hashtag squads for hazmat and special operations, which was a game changer and a precursor to some of the units that the FDNY has right now, ever since they merged in 1996. And it was an agency that was humming a lot better in 1996 than it was in 1989. And any time before that, where they didn't have resources, the training wasn't as good. Really, thanks to those three guys and many more, it became good. And it became a viable agency to merge either with the NYPD, who wanted EMS at that time, or the FDNY, which ended up getting it. Chris didn't stick around, I don't think, for the FDNY merger. He went out to Pasadena, and he was a captain out there for quite a number of years. And he'll tell me all about it for what'll be a good volume. Well, I guess that'll be volume 2, since tonight won't be volume 2 of the Best of the Bravest Nationwide edition. But this was a guy that worked in Station 45 out in Queens, Station 37, was volunteer fireman on Long Island for a number of years as well. This is someone who has responded to numerous significant incidents throughout the course of his career, both in Pasadena, Texas, and of course, and throughout his time in New York City EMS. So Garrett Lindgren, I worked for New York City EMS 1978 to 1981. It was a nightmare. FDNY was the best thing that could have happened to EMS. And it's true. And anybody that was working back then, Patty Pogan, all these different guys that had experience prior to either going on the police department, the fire department, like yourself, Garrett, would tell you that. It was a terrible agency back then. And I remember ESU guys telling me stories where they would be summoned on a medical call where they would be providing BLS care basically until the bus got there. Somebody needed oxygen. ESU would just grab an oxygen tank and give that person oxygen, sometimes for as much as an hour, until a bus could show up. So that was an agency that, talk about being in the trenches. They were the epitome of the trenches back then. And anybody that was working for that agency or with that agency and different emergencies could tell you that. But that shift started in the mid to late 80s towards making it a lot more viable and making it a lot more well-run. And in 96, like I said, it was in a much better spot, but still that merger was needed. And like I said, the NYPD wanted it because Phil Pulaski, who I tried to get on the show some time ago, he was supposed to do it, canceled last minute. I haven't tried since. I haven't talked to the man since. Nothing against him. Just I kind of said okay and moved on. But I remember talking with him off air. This is not anything confidential. Otherwise, obviously, I wouldn't be saying it. And I asked him, I said, listen, you go out to Nassau County on Long Island and EMS is under the purview of the police. It's rare. Usually when you think of EMS, you associate it with fire. But there's a few instances in the country where police have control of the EMS corps. And so I said, well, why didn't the NYPD? Not that I felt that the NYPD, yep, and a lot of the FDNY guys have told me the same thing, the resuscitator. So ESU and FD back then had to do that because the bus just wasn't available. And that was kind of the early stages of FD CFRD runs. And now they go in a lot of medicals. But with that being said, where was I? Get my train of thought back. As far as the PD thing, I asked Inspector Pulaski, who ended up chief of detectives later on in his career, so I guess I should call him Chief Pulaski, that is, why didn't you guys take it? Not that I felt that it belongs to the NYPD, for as much of listen, I love both agencies, but in regards to EMS, I'm pretty adamant in saying, listen, and this is nothing against Nassau County, but I'm adamant in believing that EMS should not be under the purview of police. If it works in Nassau County, then hey, it works out there. That's the way it's been for a while. And if it's functioning out there just fine, then hey, don't change it. But otherwise, if there's a debate as to who should oversee EMS operations, that's a fire department thing. And that should never, ever, ever be changed under any circumstances. So I'm glad the FDNY has it. I'm glad it's its own division. If you go out to St. Louis, Missouri, it's the same thing. They have the same setup as the FDNY does. St. Louis Fire Department, but St. Louis Fire Department EMS division. So I'm not sure. I think Boston might have the same setup too. That's the way it should be. That's the way it should be. Police officers should be trained, I believe, as EMTs. The more officers you have that are trained and certified emergency medical technicians, if not paramedics, the better. Because sometimes you have situations where the police get there first. And if you have a cop that's there and can at least provide basic life support, if not advanced life support, depending on his or her training, that's a huge plus until fire gets there or EMS gets there. And Boston is the same. Thanks for confirming that, Chris. So I think, listen, that should be, if it's not a required, I know for ESU, that's an automatic thing. You need to be an EMT if you want to be in the emergency service unit for either the NYPD or the Port Authority Police. And that's the way it should be. And you have guys and gals currently in ESU, their side job is working the ambulance. Some of them are EMTs, some of them are paramedics. Huge plus. The more knowledge you have of the medical stuff, the better. And Garrett Lindgren says BFD responds on medicals as first responder EMTs, and that's good. They're intertwined, and they should be. But should police have their own divisions? No. And so anyway, back to the Chief Pulaski story. I asked him, why didn't you guys take EMS? And he said, well, simply put, we didn't want to foot the medical bill. Simple as that. So they punted on it. It was debated, but ultimately, I believe Howard Safer's last act, the late great Howard Safer, God, I miss him. He was such a great guy. His last act as fire commissioner before he became New York City Police Commissioner, which he did a great job with that too, was merging FDNY with New York City EMS. And that's been a great thing. They're not paid enough. That's unfortunate. That hasn't changed much in nearly 30 years since the merger. But they are better off. They are better off, but they should be paid a lot more. And it's unfortunate that they're not. And that's been a gripe for years, to where I feel like it's created a bit of a tension there between the FDNY and the FDNY EMS division, because it almost feels like EMS gets treated as the stepchild, which I hate seeing. And I don't think that that's correct. Especially with some of these individuals that have hopes of being a firefighter someday and want to make that lateral move. The amount of runs these EMS personnel are going on, and this is not even including the EMS personnel for independent hospitals and ambulances like New York Presbyterian, for example, or does Bellevue have their own ambulance corps? I'm not sure. I know New York Presbyterian does. I think Langone does too, NYU. But, with that being said, the amount of runs they deal with, the amount of, nonsense calls mixed in with the legit medicals they have to deal with, the least we can do is make sure they're adequately paid. And listen, it's way above this podcast to have that discussion. But the fact that so much has changed in terms of equipment, in terms of operations, in terms of training since the merger in 1996 to where we sit having this conversation at 7:41 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on May 8th, 2024, and pay has not changed. And if it has changed very minimally, is very sad. Is very sad. Chris Burke, there's not a specific program. It's one of those things where you basically pay your dues on EMS, and then you apply just like any other person. But you get, I imagine, you have to get some sort of points. Let me highlight. You guys can see it in the chat, but I'll highlight it anyway. Bellevue is a health and hospitals, HHC. I forget what it stands for. I know what it is, but I forget what it stands for. Bellevue is a HHC hospital. They don't run their own buses. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Gary. I mean, I can't, like, I had a long day at work today, so I'm a little shot right now. I apologize if I'm not on my usual game. But oh my goodness, God, I can't remember what it stands for. Garrett, put it in the chat because I forgot what it stands for. HHC. I'm sorry. I was at Health and Hospital Sport. Thanks, man. That's what I'm like. It was on the tip of my tongue. I just forgot. And I knew that. Today we were down at the New Haven Fire School. We were doing RIT training. Our shift was. Thank you. You guys are here for me. And it was hot. It was a good day. I was glad I was there, but it was raining in the morning. So like an idiot, I'm wearing a short sleeve right now. Too little too late, right, guys? But I wore flannel and jeans because it was where we are. The fire school is right by the water, and it was raining heavy. It was a little breezy, so the wind's whipping, especially when you're closer to the water. So I'm like, don't dress in short sleeve, even if the forecast calls for 70-degree temperatures, and wear some long pants because you don't want to be getting rained on, and you don't want to be cold either because you don't want to get sick. And I'm rolling up my sleeves, I'm sweating, I'm opening up my shirt and doing a whole lot of this because I'm hot. And I don't mean the attractive hot. I mean my body's on fire hot, and if that was me, these poor guys in their full-on bunker gear going through RIT scenarios, they were even hotter, unfortunately. But they did a great job. It was very good training. And even as a civilian, I try to pay attention to that. Even if I didn't have the career ambitions that I do, hydrate. I did. And they did too. We had a cooler, we had water, Gatorade, the whole 9 yards. We did. And we made sure we stayed on top of that. But even as a civilian in my current job doing the social media for them, I always try to hang on to what's being said, because even if you never have any ambitions of crossing over and doing the job itself, it's good to know these things. It's always good to know these things because you can better understand operations. And if if you're doing voiceovers as I do for the social media, you know what you're talking about. You have an informed perspective from being around these guys. Today was our C shift. They did it today. And they went through multiple evolutions, multiple different scenarios. It was something of a live burn. We use harmless smoke, but it still simulated what the condition can be where you can't see anything. But when you're looking for a down member, you're going by the sound of the pass alarm. And, we did that from about 10 o'clock in the morning to about 3 o'clock in the afternoon with breaks in between. There was a lunch break, of course, so guys got their chance to rest and hydrate before they started doing evolutions again. But I enjoyed that, and I try to be, Garrett. I try to be. I enjoyed it very much. I'll be back there tomorrow, and I will dress in shorts, even if it's going to rain. Too bad, it's still going to be hot, so I'll wear shorts and a shorter sleeve shirt, and I'm cold, whatever. With my luck, I probably will be, but I'll deal with it because I don't want to be sweating to death again. But it was very good. It was very good to see that. And RIT is tough in that, listen, thank God it doesn't happen where you need RIT that often because things are going seamlessly. Guys get the job done. Nobody gets hurt. And on we go. The fire's out. And sometimes RIT guys can get frustrated because, I just stood there. I didn't do anything. Well, there's a situation where and I say this with all due respect to the firefighter and their capabilities. And I'm not thinking about anyone specific. I'm just saying in general. But if you're on RIT, I don't want you to do anything, because if you have to step in and do something, it means something is terribly wrong. So if you're on RIT, and nothing against you guys that do it, I know you guys are go-getters. I know you want to go in there. I know you want to be on a hose line or overhauling it and all that good stuff. That's the exact attitude you got to have in a job like that. But if you're on RIT, and this is coming strictly from a civilian's perspective, and I'm sure any fire officer feels the same way and any firefighter feels the same way, we want you standing in place. And we want you to stay in that exact same position for as long as the operation is going on. Because if you have to move, something is wrong and somebody's hurt. And that's not something that we ever want to see, but it's a reality. According to a captain I spoke with, 93% of Maydays, and I'm not sure if this applies to Connecticut or nationwide, but he sent me an article, so I know it's a legit statistic. Not that I would doubt him. Great fire officer he is. I won't name him, but I work with him, and he's just the best. One of several terrific fire officers I get the chance to work for, because the beauty of my job is I don't overlap with one shift. I overlap with all four of them. We have an ABCD set up for our shifts, so I get to see everyone and get to know the different fire officers and get to work under them and the different styles that they have. All good, all great. But in this case, for this shift commander, he sends me the article, and I didn't know that 93% of the Maydays are self-solved, either because the person that calls it self-rescues from whatever the situation is. They may go through a floor, for example, or their crew is right there, so the crew just steps in if they're on the engine or the truck and rescues them. Or, they just cancel it on their own. Let's say that they're disoriented. They don't know where they are. They figure out where they are. Okay, cancel a Mayday. And that's a great thing. But it's that 7%. It's that 7% where something can go wrong potentially. And you need to make sure that you're ready to step in. And I'm not just saying this because I work there, but when you look at the capabilities of our department as a whole, we really hammer home the point of training. We are not that big of a city. We're a city of 55,000 in West Haven, if you count the other two districts. Like I said before, as you guys know, we're not one fire department. We are rather 3 fire districts. So I'm not sure where our district population is, but I know if you combine the Allentown district with the West Shore district and the first district where I work, it's 55,000. Sizable, but not to the level of New Haven, which has 300K people in it. So we're a much bigger city. There's more going on because there's more territory to cover. We get our fair share of medicals. Box alarms do come in, when they do. There's not that many of them, but they come in. We see our fair share of fire. There's about a good 20 to 30 working ones a year. So it's not that far in between. Whereas if you're in a city of 1,000 people, 2,000 people, you almost never see fire depending on where you are. Not the case in West Haven. We get our share. But for a city that's not as big, and I'm sure New Haven does the same thing, but for a city that's not as large, we hammer home how important it is. We need to train. The guys eat it up and they want to do it. They enjoy these classes because even if we may not see the level of fire that the FDNY does, or even if we go through the entirety of our careers and never encounter some of the scenarios that we go through in training, it's always good to have that training, because when push comes to shove, and God forbid something does happen, our guys are ready. Our guys are ready. We have some of the best training, I think, around, because of the fact that no matter what it is, we really take the time to delve into different scenarios, look at different classes, coordinate those classes, and get everything moving. And each shift goes through it, and each shift is better off for it. And the capabilities and certifications our shifts have leave no doubt in my mind that there's nothing that our department is not prepared for. But even with that said, we are only, yeah, you're right, Joe. You're only as good as your training, and that's true. We are only hungrier to get more. And I can say we, from working there, and like I said, I love being there. I love the New Haven Fire School. It's a great place to be. There are guys in my department who have gone through that academy. There's 2 academies you can go through, I guess, if you're going to apply in West Haven, which is either that one because of the proximity, and sometimes they will take applicants and those who are going to become firefighters from surrounding towns that are close by. In West Haven, we are right down the street from the New Haven Fire School. We're right on the border there. So we have sent individuals there before. One of my lieutenants actually went through that school. Or there is the Windsor Locks Academy, which is, from where I am, is about an hour away from New Haven and West Haven too. It's a bit of a drive to get up there, and you do your 15 weeks, and then you get on. So we have somebody right now actually who's in the class who's going to graduate in a couple of weeks. So looking forward to that guy coming on. I've met him, had some good interactions with him. I think he's got the right temperament for the job, and I look forward to seeing his graduation and seeing his growth in our department. But yeah, we really do hone in on it. We haven't had a box in a little bit, and watch as I say that, there's going to be a box coming in tonight. I got one a couple months ago. As I talked about before, the last time I did a segment like this, I went to one. It was, very surreal experience. But I think, and I can speak a little bit more freely on this, that the fact that it's not the fire itself, that I'm not going to speak on because that's under investigation. So that's not what I'm referring to. I mean, more so me, in that when I see, how would I put this? When I see what the guys are doing, and when I see operations like the fire I went to or the training today, I have that FOMO. I have that FOMO, that fear of missing out. And it's not a fear. I am missing out, I feel, because don't get me wrong, I love my current job. I do not want it to come across as if I'm knocking what I currently do. My job, doing the social media, is a great job. And I love it, love it, love it. It's always good going into work. I'm always happy going into work. Very few people could say they have a job they enjoy and look forward to going to. And I'm one of those guys that gets to say that. So by all means, that is not a put down of my current civilian position. But every time I see that engine take off, every time I see that truck take off or that rescue take off, even if it's just for a medical or whatever the case may be, every time I see the guys going out on calls or doing cool trainings like today, which was really insightful and educational, I'm like, I want that to be me. I want to be on that engine. I want to be on that rescue. I want to be on that truck. I want to go do RIT trainings. I wanted to go do swift water rescue training. I want to do all that stuff because it's cool. Who does it? You get to go on a fireboat. You get to go on a fire truck. And I'm like, dang, man, like I would love for that to be me. And I think being around, I've wanted to be, this is something I've told people before, so this is not anything new. I've wanted to be a fireman since I was 3 years old. And I kind of put it off for a while because in my teenage years, I was sick. I was dealing with so many health issues that I pretty much disqualified myself. But I remember Paulie Rogers telling me something off air when he was getting ready to go on Getting Salty. He's like, have you ever thought about going on the job? And this is about a year and change ago. And at that point, I was still in my put it off mode. And he told me, he's like, Mike, you can't disqualify yourself. You can't. Don't ever think that you can't do it. And around that time, I started changing my diet up a little bit. That was around the time I started going to the gym. I started out with Planet Fitness. Now I'm doing CrossFit, which has been great. And I'm the healthiest I've been in years. I outgrew so many of those medical issues. Thankfully they're a thing of the past. And obviously I'm a lot more fit now because of the work I've been doing between Planet Fitness and my trainers at CrossFit, to where at 24, I still have more muscle to build and more of a physique to churn out as I go. But I feel the best I felt in a decade. I haven't been this healthy since I was 14, So now that's kind of when, especially working where I work and being on Getting Salty and doing this podcast where the vast majority, even though I have my law enforcement guest on and my media guest on, that's great too. Another huge chunk of the guests are fire service related guests. Talking with those guys and gals over the years really kickstarted that drive. And I think I just had that light bulb going off over the head moment where I'm like, Mike, what are you waiting for? Like, it's right there. Take it. Like, go get your EMT. Go through the training. The only thing that's stopping me is me. And I'm like, you know what? I think I can do this job. And, I had discussions with my family, and, I really took a good time to think about it before I decided that this was the path I wanted to go down. But I said, listen, there's no reason I shouldn't go down this path. There's no reason I shouldn't try it. And even if I fall flat on my face and fail, at least I know I went through it and tried it. Than to always have that what if hanging in the back of my head, hanging over my shoulder. So for me, this is the path, and there are steps. Naturally, getting the EMT is huge. I need to pass that class. I begin the class in June. I need to pass that class. It's a 2-month class. I got to really hone in on it, take good notes on it. It would be a huge setback if I don't pass it. And it's money down the drain, but not even the money part. It's the moral gut punch. It's the inner gut punch that it would do to me if I don't pass this class. So I need to pass this, need it. And then after that, I want to go into the volunteer corps for a little bit and learn the job. I want to go on an engine or on a rescue, whatever the case may be, and learn this job and go through this training so I can be better off for it. and then, apply and hopefully get onto the paid side. But God, it's right there. And who knows? It's May 8th, 2024. Where are we on May 8th, 2025? Am I on the job? Am I at the very minimum an EMT? Have I been in the volunteer corps for a little bit? Well, at least I hope that. But I need this, man. I need this. And it'll be so sweet one day. I keep telling myself every workout I do, and hopefully with this EMT class and passing it, everything I do in regards to that and getting the certifications necessary, you are one step closer. You're one step closer. You're one workout closer. You're one day closer to your goal. And I keep trying to picture myself just graduating Fire Academy. It sounds sappy, it sounds corny, but I'm trying to stay motivated. Would I still do this podcast if I got on the job someday? Yeah, I'd probably take a hiatus for a while so I can go to the Fire Academy. That's a given. You can't be doing a podcast when you got 15 weeks worth of training. So I would probably take a break and focus for those 4 months. But I want it. I want it. It's in, like I said, I feel like I'm on the cusp. And thanks, Garrett. It hasn't always been easy for me to be a glass half full guy. In my younger years, I struggled with being a glass half empty guy. But I think this is the attitude I need to have. If I'm going to do this job, that's the mentality I need to program myself for now. And just want to be I've been on the engine before, going to trainings and whatnot, but I'm the civilian. I'm the civilian. I want to go there and I want to do something. I want to contribute. I want to be in that uniform one day. And even if we just do a crap ton of medicals for 24 hours, so be it. Whatever, I'll do them. Just as long as I can be on that job. And hopefully, if I pass my EMT class and I go into the volunteer corps, what I would love is to get a couple of boxes under my belt. I don't want anyone to get hurt, obviously. I'm not evil. I'm not wishing for that. And I don't want to see anybody's houses burned down either. I'm not wishing for that either. But from the standpoint of getting some good knowledge, you can do a live burn. And a live burn is great. I've seen live burns are the real deal. The instructors are great with that. There is nothing, as I'm sure you guys can agree that have done the job, like actually being there at a real life box. This is not a training. This is the real deal. And I need to see that, and I need to experience that for myself to know, okay, how would I handle interior overhaul operations if I had my Fire 1? And if I don't have my Fire 1, but I'm at least an EMT, and so I can volunteer and at least do exterior operations, how would I handle all those things? So I need to know. I need to be there. I need to be in it. And we'll see. So it may take a while. Getting out of different departments isn't easy. You can test, and testing around is never a bad thing. I don't know if I'll take the FDNY test because it's being first suspected of fire, says Joe Maliga. He's right. And I'm not putting the FDNY test down, but I don't envision relocating to New York City anytime soon. And I know the waiting list is quite long, so I wouldn't want to take a test. This is my whole thing, for a job I'm not 110% committed to taking. And that's no knock on the FDNY. If I lived in New York City, or even if I lived, like, let's say in Stamford, Connecticut, which is a half hour outside the city, well, then I would give it some serious thought. But I'm 2 hours away from the city. And would I want to take that challenge on, knowing full well that, there's departments within my backyard I could apply to? Not necessarily. Because what would happen essentially is, let's say I complete my goals and my objectives. I take the FDNY test right now, right? I get what I got to get on that front. And let's say I do well. 5 years from now, let's say I accomplished what I wanted to when I got on the job. If the FDNY calls me and say, hey, you want to join the next New York City Fire Academy? I would be honored. Of course I would be honored. But if I'm enjoying what I'm doing here in the Connecticut area, and I've accomplished that, and I've already gone through Fire Academy, and I'm kind of in the early stages of what I hope is a burgeoning and blossoming career, why would I want to hit the reset button, And that's kind of the thing that a lot of guys have now. And I get why the waiting list is long. It's a city of 8 million people. And you have people applying from all over, but I don't know. I don't think I would do it. I wouldn't want to, like I said, I got to be, my mentality, rightly or wrongly, is be 100% in or 100% out. And that if I'm like hemming and hawing, like, maybe I will, maybe I won't, you can't be doing that, especially for a department as rich in history and as rich in tradition as the FDNY is. You got to be committed 110%. Either you want the job or you don't. So I wouldn't want to do the FDNY a disservice by taking the test. Let's say I score good on it, and just so I have it in the back pocket, and then I don't end up taking the job. That's just me. So we'll see where things take me. And there's departments right now you could apply for with no prior experience, and I don't know. I don't think I want to do that either. I'm not going to rule that out, but I'm like, okay, I know you'll get the training, obviously. That's important. Naturally, they're not going to it's not like they're going to slap you a bunker gear, say, hey, you're hired. Congratulations, go stretch a line. They're going to put you in the academy and they're going to train you. So I'm thinking hard because I'm like, okay, do I apply now and put that in my back pocket for a department that's closer here? And fork over the money for the registration fee? Or do I get my EMT first, put myself in a position where I start going out on medical calls and, start learning medical response and get my ride time in, which you can do with a local department, to your question, John, which, that would include my department ideally, and get my time in an ER and get touches that way, as they coin it in the EMS world. Learn that, volunteer for a little bit, learn the fire side. Or do I just jump straight in and apply with no prior experience? And I think right now, the latter option is more, or the former option, I should say, is more appealing than the latter option. Because at least for me, and that my mentality can change, I'm not necessarily married to these viewpoints because you got to evolve in life and sometimes circumstances do change. But where things sit for me right now mentally is take it in steps. Take it in steps. Learn point A, which is EMS work. Learn point B, which is, okay, be a volunteer fireman for a bit. Learn that job. And then you can get to point C where you're on the paid. Because if I jump in right now, am I ready? Am I physically ready? I've gotten stronger physically. Am I going to be able to measure up? I don't know. I don't know. And like I said, I'd rather know, okay, I am ready, than, jump at the carrot just because I want the job so bad and I don't put myself in that good of a position. And Chris, that's kind of what I'm thinking. And it's hard. It's hard because I'm a guy that I move at, sometimes it works for me. Sometimes it doesn't. I move at breakneck speed, and I'm learning to slow down. I often joke I've gone from being at 100 miles an hour to going down to 75, but I'm a guy that lives in the fast lane, in terms of how I approach things day to day. And I'm so gung ho about, especially things I'm passionate about, that I'm like, oh, because you see those applications and it's like, oh man, I want to do it so bad. But I keep telling myself, you're not there yet. One step at a time. You're going to get there. That light at the end of the tunnel, you're going to reach that light, but you gotta hem in and just hammer down on what you got to accomplish in the short term. And the short term is obviously, making sure that you're squared away with the things that I mentioned earlier. But, I would love it if a year from now, I'm looking back at this random podcast I did, which wasn't supposed to be a solo show, but rather, with a guest where I'm spitballing with you guys. And I can point back to and say, wow, here I am now. But it's right there. It's right there. And I want it. I want it bad. And I think we can wrap up on that note. The Knick game's about to start, and I don't want to miss it. So I'm going to go have a heart attack with them. I want to thank you guys for tuning in. Chris Ebden's in the chat. So coming up next in the Mike the Raven podcast is Chris Ebden, former New York City EMS paramedic, and also a Pasadena, Texas fire captain. That'll be the Best of the Bravest Nationwide Edition, Volume 2. Instead of 3, this was supposed to be Volume 2. And Chris, you're right. And that's what I plan to do. I need to do that because that'll help me big time so that there's no secrets by the time I'm in the academy someday. But, I'm looking ahead, John. I am looking ahead. But Chris Ebden, yeah, speaking of looking ahead, he's coming up on Friday, and that should be a good show. I'm excited about it. And thank you, Garrett. I appreciate the love, and not just you, but everybody in the chat tonight. Next Wednesday, ideally, Joe Bonanno. No, not the mobster. The good Joe Bonanno. He's a former FDNY fireman, heck of a cook, and got an interesting story. So that'll be volume 60, I believe, milestone volume of the Best and Bravest interviews with the FDNY's lead. So I spoke with Joe off the air. He reached out to me a while ago. We finally connected with each other, and I'm excited about that show. So that's next Wednesday, this Friday. New York City EMS and Pasadena Fire Captain Chris Ebden for Best of the Bravest Nationwide. In the meantime, on behalf of all of you in the audience tonight, I am Mike Colón. We'll see you next time. Go Knicks, go Rangers. And that's all I got to say. Take care.